Good morning. This is Zakaria Mansoor. I'm your grade 10 teacher for today. We are doing life sciences and specifically the skeletal system. Of course, this is the national tutoring campaign and we want to make the most of our time. Let's get cracking. So the skeletal system. This might look like a joke, but of course, it looks so cool. We have a rainbow and we have some exercise. And as we know, exercise is vital. To keep that, you look at these pictures here. We have somebody dancing on the left. There's a boy riding his bicycle. There's another young toddler who seems to have lost his skull, like the Breaking Bad. We have a police officer there saluting, and we have somebody playing football, maybe. We know that our bones, everything in our body is extremely fragile, meaning that if you had to go onto the road and somebody had to knock you, of course, steel would obviously crush bone and skin. So it's very important that when we have kids and when we have fellow brothers and sisters, we should watch them at all the time, especially when they're playing in the parks and stuff. You know that injuries can be expensive and they can be very tragic to one's health, especially if you fall. We know that for a fact that babies, their bones are much softer than adults. So if you look at even a cranium of a child, if you have to accept that this one's the baby compared to this adult, um, the cranium of a child has many or it's like small pieces and puzzles put together. And as the child grows, the cranium grows as well. So you notice for a baby on the top of the head. So if you feel your head, you'll notice that it's smooth now because we adults. But if you feel the top of a baby's head, it's like it's closing. Like if you put your two hands on top of your side of your head and you push up, that's how it closes on the top. So if you have kids or brothers or sisters, you should be really careful. Um, because once you have a broken leg or broken hand, then they put steel in it. So they have a special steel. It's not stainless steel. They use titanium um, to mend broken bones, and we don't want that happening to us anytime or to anyone. Okay, let's look at the human skeleton. Human skeletons are, of course, the fundamental part of our structure for humans and other species like us as well. Last week we covered exoskeleton, endoskeleton, hydroskeleton, and we discussed the different types of structures that animals and vertebrates or invertebrates have. Humans have a living endoskeleton, internal skeleton made of bone, cartilage, and connective tissue. At birth, the human skeleton consists of over 270 bones, which is amazing because once you grow older, in adults, this number reduces to about 206 bones. So we have 206 bones here. And if you were paying attention, you'd, you'd remember that this boy here, so why is it a higher number when you are a baby compared to a lower number when you are an adult? See if there's anyone here. Okay, so if you look at the skull here, you notice that for baby it's like a small puzzle. So where you have the above your eyes, so above this area here, you'd have smaller like smaller bone puzzles almost. And as you get older, the puzzle, like the pieces here, come together and forms one skull. So this is one of the reasons why you have an exceeding number when you are young compared to an older when you are older. If you look at the skulls as well, every shape of a human is different. We have a normal set of prints that you'd see on the when you're studying in diagrams, but generally or everywhere around the world, there is no one skeleton that's exactly the same, type. But humans are very different. Like if you look at your fingerprints, everybody's fingerprint is different in the world, which is amazing. Okay, so we know that from 270 it went to 206 bones due to the fusion of smaller bones into larger structures. There we go. The adult skeleton is made up of the axial skeleton and the mandibular skeleton. Um, when we are young, of course, we grow at the age of 18, 19. Our bodies stop growing. If you look at this gentleman here, of course, he's very muscular. We won't be talking about his muscles. That's further on next week. But if you look at his bone structure, he looks pretty buff. He looks uh, pretty strong. And of course, it doesn't come just by waking up one day and having all these muscles around you. I wish somebody would do that. Like if you have a fairy godmother, just tell her to make that wish for me. But how cool it would be if you just have all those muscles whenever you need it. Of course, training is difficult. I'm sure you have friends and family that do train. They go rigorously and vigorously to the gym, which is excellent. Some people play sports, um, but more importantly, people go to the gym to keep fit as well. So if you look at the man pumping weights here, you look at his muscles are around your bones. So basically, if you fall, your bones, your muscle, it helps you. It creates like a buffer, almost like a sponge. So you find that when you fall, if you fall on your shoulder, you're not going to break your shoulder easily because of the muscle there. Muscular skeletal system. Here's a whole view of the full skeleton from skull going down in all different angles. What's amazing is with technology, as you can see, this is not an actual skull or bones or 206 bones, if you would call it. This is printed. So now we have technology that will print you something like this here using plastic or some kind of carbon. Now, my point here is that 100 years ago, or 200 years, let's say 100 years ago, if you were at King's College at London, somebody would have to literally die, and you'd have to get a body from the morgue, and then the physician would cut it, and the class would stand in front of it, so we'd see the body. Like when you're in school and you have frogs and you have to dissect them in grade 3, grade 4, when you have rabbits in grade 6. So when you study medicine, then they will take a carcass, a human body, and they will cut it up in front of you. So that's what they used to do in the past. They still do it today as well. But now it's so easy for classrooms and other places where you have 3D models where you can turn around and say, this is the cervix. You can look at the femur. You can look at the rib cage, turn it around. There are lots of programs on mobile phones. So if you are interested, you should download them, especially the 3D model ones. And it will help you with labeling diagrams and drawing. So I don't know if you remember last week or the previous lessons, we talked about analyzing data and also diagrams. Very important, drawing diagrams and labeling them correctly. Okay, so here we have a diagram of the skeleton. We're going to go through it quickly. There are three main parts to it. We're going to go to, so the first one's a skull here. Then we have the spinal column section, which is this section here, and then we have the lower pelvis section here at the bottom. The cranium is here on the top. Let me see if I can get a marker to mark it correctly. Okay, so if you look at the cranium, I'm going to draw lines like this, small lines at the back. And this is the one for infants. So as you're growing, and for adults as well. So it has these small lines like this. And when you are small, when you are young, it's kind of bigger, and as you get older, it closes. I have a question here, and I feel it's pertinent to ask it. If you look at the structure here, you notice that we have the rib cage, of course, and we know what goes inside the rib cage. Some of our vital organs, we say vital, V-I-T-A-L. Um, I'm gonna write it down here. V-I, like a shark almost cut me there on the top. Let me try to write it down here at the bottom. V. Oh my goodness, it's not writing clearly. But anyway, if you are taking down notes, it's V-I-T-A-L. And vital means something that's extremely necessary. Example, oxygen is vital for humans. Um, Food is vital for humans. And here we have, so your lungs and your other organs go inside the rib cage. If you look at the cranium here now, you might ask yourself, hey, why does this have a cage around it and there are lots of gaps and spaces between the ribs? And then you ask yourself, if why is the brain fully covered? Why do you have a full complete skull on the top? Well, I always debate this, and generally it's the correct version, that the brain is the most important part of the body. Um, why I say this? Because if you had to have a lung failure in one lung, um, then you'd have another lung here to give you that oxygen. But more in fact, if you have a damage, like if you damage your lung, you would be able to fix it. If you even damage your heart, if you have clogged arteries and if you have fat in your heart, then they have an operation where they open the ribs, so they cut the section here in the center, they open the ribs up, and then they open your heart and remove some kind of or the fat, or sometimes they put a ticker in there. Ticker is a pacemaker. They might put a stent, like a piece of plastic that has, maybe you had like cancer in that artery or damaged artery. So if you look at the brain, so if these arteries or these organs are damaged, then you could possibly get a new one, like via transplant, or they could fix it. But the cranium here, if somebody like pokes you with a knife here or the ice pick into your head, generally people die from these wounds. So there again, I don't think it's debatable, but the cranium, the brain is the most important part of the body. If you look at, if you Google it, I think about 5 years ago, there was a group of Italian doctors. They wanted to do, or they did a brain transplant. I think the patient survived for about 3 months. They removed his brain and put it into another brain, another human, sorry. They tried it with animals and monkeys before. It was the first time they tried it with a human. I think he survived for about a month or a week, I'm not sure. But anyway, that is science. And as we talked about it in Unit 1 or Lesson 1, there are lots of jobs that will head you in that direction if you like science, if you like medicine, and we've been through that. Okay, so we have the sternum here, humerus. If you look at the humerus and the tibia, you'll notice that we are not like other mammals like elephants. So if you look at the humerus here, it's very slow on my side, but anyway, if you look at the humerus and you look at the tibia, you can see that the composition of its structure is different. You'll notice that the one closer to the ribs, which is closer to our head, is thinner than the one at the bottom. Even if you look at the femur is thicker, and of course the tibia is thicker. And if you remember, we saw a picture of an elephant in a previous lesson. And if you look at the elephant, they're generally the same, meaning that because they walk on four legs, so if you had to take your hands and make this into kind of your toes at the bottom, so you'd have like 20 toes. And if you had to walk on your hand like an elephant or tiger, then the composition of your bone structure would have probably been the same in the front, from the front to the back or from the top to the bottom. And that being said, if you look at a bear as well, um, the bear it's very similar, but of course the bear walks and the bear climbs up trees and fends for itself by getting leaves or just like the elephant, but at the same time the elephant probably walks a longer distance. It's a bigger animal. It's more on its four rather than its two because a bear climbs up trees, sits on pieces of wood. Um, it's different, has a different cycle to an elephant. If your bones are broken, as I said before, example, if you fall and you crack your bone, if you crack your tibia or femur, then they put a steel structure here, a titanium piece, and they put like rod, like it's called rods, and they put like screws and bolts to hold it. Extremely painful. And one annoying thing is when you go through a metal detector, like at an airport, then it makes a horrible sound, ding, ding. And then the police stop you and then they're like, hey, where's your weapon? Do you have a knife on you? And then they search you, they search your bag, only to find out that you have a metal screw or plate in your brain or in your bone. Anyway, let's go to skeleton, 206 bones. We have two different types mainly, the axial and the appendicular skeleton. Axial skeletons are made up of the skull, the vertebral column, and ribs and sternum. The vertebral column, of course, protects the spinal cord. One of the most important columns or cords that we have is the spinal cord, which is the one that goes from our head right down to our butterfly bone here. Ribs and sternum protect the heart. We talked about this, the rib cage, lungs, and the liver. We noticed that the ribs are very flexible in order to accommodate us to breathe. We call it inhaling and exhaling, of course. Inhale when you take in the air, exhale when you take out the air. Our ribs, they contract and they expand, contract and they expand. Of course, there are other items and other muscles that are responsible for this. Um, then we have the appendicular skeleton. pectoral girdle, attachments of the arms. Um, just like if you remember this one here, you probably want to think of someone like not from 21 Bridges, from Wakanda. Remember the guy who was fighting with Black Panther, a Russian guy, yeah, not Captain America. What's his name? Um, Winter Soldier. So if you look at Winter Soldier, pectoral girdle, attachment of arms. So remember, he's like that guy lost all his arms, no legs. I think he's got his normal legs, but like they cut his arms off and they put a robot arm. So that's where remember pectoral girdle, attachment of arms. Then we have, here we go again, probably this whole part here, I guess, a candicular skeleton. Just remember the Winter Soldier, I guess. Attachment of legs as well, pelvic girdle. Um, we in the future probably at the moment you have attachment of metal like into a human body, which you probably become like a cyborg, what we call it. So you like cyborg is like had some parts which are of steel and they connected to your body. So if you look at people that have like in Thailand and Vietnam where there are lots of mines like bombs in the ground, you find that kids walk on it or people walk on it and guess what? You stand on it and boom, your leg gets broken out, blown and into smithereens. So they have some universities that have started these programs. They're very expensive, so hospitals, a lot of hospitals don't do it where they attach this mechanical arm or mechanical leg, which is really great. I hope it becomes cheaper for everyone to access it. And then you have at the bottom of the appendicular skeleton upper limbs and lower limbs. There are 206 bones in the adult human skeleton body, which can be grouped into different categories. Okay, let's start with axial skeleton. Axial skeleton forms the central axis of the body and consists of the skull, vertebral column, and rib cage and sternum. The skull consists of the cranium and facial bones. Now, if you look at the facial bones, I know you don't have like issues like other older people have, but you find that like in a person's face, they might have a small nose or a small cheekbone. One side of the cheekbone is bigger than the other. So in nature, we have these issues as well. I'm not going to call it crossbreeding or whatever, but with race and different fractions, you probably have a bigger sternum. If you are from Congo, like if you're from Congo, I know some fat people, they have huge stomachs. If you're from North Africa, like Ivory Coast, and if you're from like Somalia, not Somalia, if you're from Kenya, and you were the Maasai there, Maasai are extremely tall, like 2.1 meters. Like if you look at people from the north, like in America, you have someone called Kevin Garnett, and of course he's African American, but he's like 2.2 meters tall. So you can imagine if he had to marry, like he's married to a Mexican, so the children will have different features compared to others. And so sometimes when they have different features like in the face, you have an offset of a bigger cheek on one side, and that's human nature. So with these things here, you have plastic surgeons, they can sort it out. But facial bones are one of the most important thing, I think, in your system or in your body, because it's the structure or where your face sits, where your skin sits, and it gives you all the beauty. Some people are pretty, some people are not, but we all beautiful. That's the most important thing. When you wake up every day in the mirror, you just have to look at yourself and say, hey, I'm so beautiful. I've got lovely facial bones. And if you don't, just dream that when you get richer, you can have nice fat lips. Like people do the fat lips, but for everyone, it's a fashion statement. I'm not a fan of it. If you are, um, I hope you I hope you just do some exercise and increase your muscle structure. uh, eat healthy. So if you look at these things here, a lot of people don't eat healthy, and of course they lose muscles on their face, their eyes go in. So I think better than doing some kind of surgery, you might as well just eat healthy. And that's the picture I showed you at the beginning where the guy was pumping iron. It's all about being healthy. The cranium consists of 8 flat bones joined together by immovable joints called sutures. I'm just going to go to this one here. The skull called, so opening at the base of the skull is called the foramen magnum, and this is what I was talking about when it comes to children as well. Their space is bigger than adults. And of course, why is it open for a child? That is the question. What a lovely question that I just thought of myself. It's there to actually allow for the increase of the size of the brain. Because if the baby was born with one skull, like in a round ball position or a round ball shape, the brain would not have space to grow. So it's important that they have these different, um, or like a puzzle, and then it keeps on getting bigger and closes. And so there we have it, the foramen magnum. On either side of the foramen magnum is a projection which articulates the first vertebra called the atlas. If you look at why they call it atlas, they even made a movie called Cloud Atlas, and this is regarding the medulla oblongata in your brain that allows for consciousness. Okay, here we have it. This is the labeling of the cranium. I love this, especially when you go to school. Some of the schools have the cranium like this, and you take it into pieces like a puzzle. So you attach the mandible, the maxilla. You even have the ones that have the ears on there. So if you look at this ear hole here, on this temporal side, where and you can look at the bone here. So you have out of this, you'd have the cochlea coming out here with your ear here and your lobe. Okay, you can see the hole is there. You have the nasal cavity, and this is what I was talking about here as well when it comes to how you look. If you watch like UFC or if you watch boxing, um, and you know Masvidal or you know Cain Velasquez, their noses are like completely smashed. And if you look at Cain Velasquez, his nose is like smashed to the left because they like boxers, they get hit in the face all the time. So again, like different jobs have different responsibilities. It seems like if you're a boxer or martial arts guy, you're gonna get broken. So it seems like they're not really worried, or they are worried about not getting hit. But in sports like that, or in jobs like that, it's extremely risky. I mean, if you look at some people that some wrestlers have broken their spinal column and now they can't walk, and football players as well. Here we have that one that I was talking to you about, a similar one that you put together, but this is the cranium, the skull, and there we have some brains here. Um, some brains are different color. Humans are like probably like grayish to pinkish maybe. I'm sure you've seen it in the movies. But there again, this is the think center of our whole body, the main brain center, as we call it HQ, which is the headquarter. And then here we have the sternum, we have the lungs there, happy lungs. Of course, we know that one of the most detrimental things that you could do to your own self is smoking. So as you can see, these lungs here look happy, the heart looks happy. And how does it look happy? Remember the gymming guy, right? So you have to keep your heart healthy, keep out of danger, of course. Let's look at the next one. There are 15 facial muscles. We talked about them: bones, nasal bones, mandibles. Um, of course, this is a dental formula. It's very nice to keep this formula around. It has the number of the teeth here. If you look at it, we start off from the back here. We got the molars here, premolars, canines, and incisors. and that's the formula that they have here. So you got a 3, so that's 1, 2, 3, and then you have 2, so the primo have the sizes. So a total of 3 plus 2, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that will be 8 here on this right, and on the left there will be 8, that's 16 at the bottom. Interesting fact, humans have 7 neck bones, the same as a giraffe. That's pretty weird, considering the giraffe is the tallest animal in the world, or the biggest mammalian, or the tallest mammalian. The strongest and longest bone is the thigh bone. Yes, the female, we showed you that. And of 20 people, out of 20 people have an extra rib. That's weird. Um, Having an extra rib is weird, and I think I've seen people like this, and they walk towards one side because if you have one rib more on one side, the weight is greater, so it pulls you to either the left or the right. I think it's probably the left, but kind of weird. Actually, it's not weird. It's just normal human. We're so used to having uh, people give you a formula like for modeling or for TV, and then people look at it and they're like, oh my dear, like I have to be that person. So again, everybody is different. Okay, so here we have the vertebral column. What's the most important thing to know about the vertebral column is that it protects the spinal nerves going from the top here to the bottom. So right at the bottom of our spine, it looks like it has an S shape here, but on this side it's just normal. That's the way we stand. If it was extremely straight, I don't think you'd be able to walk. I've never heard of someone having a straight rib cage like that. So anyway, cartilage is very important between the disc. So between the disc here, you have some cartilage between these discs, and if it is broken, you won't be able to walk now, especially if your spinal cord is damaged. They do have, and I was talking to you about the mechanical devices that people have. So if you watch movies like Avatar, you notice they have like a huge um, a suit that you could use, like even in the Matrix. So you jump in the suit, it's mechanized, and you are able to walk. So what an excellent way. I've seen them using it for armies and stuff, but if you actually use it for people, it would do the world so much of good. Okay, bones can move because they are not connected to muscle. Movement is the key function of the skeleton. Bones can be different shapes and sizes. These are the 4 main type of bones we have: long bones, short bones, flat bones, and cylindrical bones. Sounds like a rap song. Um, you always see this one in the garden. Normally, like if you have a dog or cat, you give them a big bone. Of course, not a human bone, but like an ox bone or goat bone. They're always hiding it just so they can get it again and remember the smell when they first initially got it. That's what they normally do. Short bone, irregular bone, and this here we notice coming down from the spine as well. And then we have flat bones. In fact, in a newborn baby, the entire vertebral column curves backwards, probably because of confines of the uterus. So um, instead of it curving this way, it would curve backwards, of course. Why? Because they are young and they haven't been walking, so majority of the time the babies are flat on their stomach or flat on their back. Most of the time, flat on their back, sorry. You don't want to be putting a baby flat on their stomach. That's just suicidal. But anyway, If you look at the curve here, babies are generally fat, but of course more towards see the opposite end as adults. Probably because of the confines of the uterus, correct as well, the shape that they are in the stomach that confines them for 9 months. Thereafter, when they're out, they have a similar shape. You always find them cuddling up like that. We have the thoracic region here made up of 12 vertebrates. You count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 and 6, 12, and then you have their pairs. So that's 12 there, 6 times 2 is, or 6 times 2 is 12, and then if you have an extra one, that's just weird. And then if you have one less chromosome, that's weird also. But normal for some, of course, if you actually are a 26 or anyway, the carcass is made up of 4 fused bones. These bones from the tail, we showed you the tail in those mammals that actually have tail, but for humans it cuts off at the bottom. So as you go down into your spine, at the bottom where you have your butterfly bone, I call it, it cuts off. But for other animals, they have tails, like baboons, hyenas, they have tails. Functions of the vertebral column supports the skull. It holds the body up. That's the main thing. And I showed you the 12 pairs on the rib cage. Here we have it, 12 pairs, 24 ribs. Here's a very good picture of the rib cage. And I'm going to go through it quickly because we've already talked about it. But you do have this in your books. Again, protection of the heart and lungs. And this is the one that I wanted to show you most importantly. We have the diaphragm. So you have the diaphragm here. My drawing is horrible, but we have the diaphragm, and then we have the intercostal muscles, like the intercostal people. So you have the diaphragm here, and then you have the intercostal muscles, and all of them like you help the body or help the rib cage to expand and contract. And there it is here, inhalation and exhalation. So inhalation, exhalation, we need these muscles here, especially the diaphragm and intercostal muscles, to move the ribs. And there's a cool picture of the skeletons. These ones are actually, they are important for locomotion, but when you get older, you don't want to be falling. Like you could fall on your hand, break your arm, fall on your leg, break your femur, tibia, whatever it is. But here around this region, you don't want to, because like once you break it, it's done. It's like, you know, when you buy something and they write guarantee, if you remove it, they don't repair it. So this is it. You don't want to have anything to do or break your leg, break your pelvis bone. There are other bones here that they're talking about. Some around the shoulder blades, which is the scapula. And then they're talking about the humerus and other parts, joining of the hinges here. You know, we join them by using cartilage. Okay, here's a good diagram of this. Now, please don't forget, when you have diagrams like this, especially the skeleton, like we discussed in the first lesson, you should try to practice this. And I know a lot of people don't want to draw, but every time you draw, you remember the parts of it, and you remember the positions of it, you remember the labeling of it. So if you want to study science, if you want to study biology, you should be practicing your diagrams. It should be like the ones you see in the textbook. Thank you so much.